up, sheeple? What's up, guys? It's Justin, your favorite founder's favorite founder, back at it with another video. And today I wanted to do a special video for my birthday. I just turned 40. Wow. That means I'm old as shit. Since most of my audience is 20-something-year-olds who probably think of turning 30 as the end of the world, Jen and I thought it would be funny if I did a video about why your 30s are actually better than your 20s. In this video, I'm gonna tell you the secret to living your best life in your 30s and why your 30s are gonna be amazing compared to your 20s. So 40, that's crazy. I remember when I started my first startup, I was 23. We hired a guy, Bill, who I think was like 33 at the time, 10 years older than me. And I thought he was gonna die. Like at any moment, I thought this guy is old AF. Now I'm like much older than he was when he came to work for me. I have no idea, side note, I have no idea why a 33-year-old would want to work for a 23-year-old. Usually that is a poor career choice. If I'm being honest. When you're 23, you have no management skills, you don't know jack shit about how to do anything, operate a company. I'd never managed anybody before. The fact that anybody handed us millions of dollars to do anything seemed questionable. But thankfully it worked out for me and it worked out for Bill. So years later, I'm turning 30, I felt fucking horrible. I was like, I'm over the hill. I'm running out of time. I'm not as successful as my peers. I was judging myself. I was comparing myself to everybody around me. We hadn't sold Twitch yet. We did have an outcome, actually. We had sold our first company, Social Camp. So I had made some money, but I was still trapped in this treadmill and I was comparing myself to everybody else and I felt really bad. And I was like, my time is running out. And now at 40, I think the overwhelming feeling that I feel is peace, which is great, and feeling grateful for life and just really feeling like I have a balanced life and I'm really happy with who I am. And all of that happened in the last 10 years, which is amazing. Since most of you in my audience are ambitious strivers in your 20s and early 30s that want to make it or die trying, by making this video, I figured I might be able to give you some useful life advice and also give you something to look forward to. All right, so without further ado, here's all the reasons why your 30s are better than your 20s. First off, Naval once said it to me, he was like, your 30s are your power alley. That's when you're most productive, you're at the peak of your game, you have both the combination of energy, because you're not that old, you're not in your 40s yet, and you also have experience. In your 20s, you don't feel confident with where you're at, right? Because you're most likely have imposter syndrome, because when you showed up, let's be honest, you were a fucking imposter, because you had no skills, and you were trying to figure out, how do I get good at this stuff? How do I, what are you even supposed to be learning? And by the time you're in your 30s, hopefully you've done that, and you've gotten to a place where you actually know what you're doing. You're not the imposter anymore. Now you're the expert, and that's why you're in your power alley. You're at your peak power. You're finally able to execute your dreams. You're able to build something big, whatever it is. When you're in your 30s, that's potentially when you're gonna be your most productive ever at building. Hopefully you've spent your last decade building up your skill set. And you might not think that you're that good at anything. When I turned 30, I certainly didn't. But it turns out I'd learned a lot. I gone from that 23-year-old who had no idea how to manage anyone to having had to manage dozens of people and having fucked up a lot. Sorry, guys. But I learned, like how to be a semi-competent manager, how to write a product spec, how to think about business, how to raise money, how to pitch someone on joining my startup, all of these different skills that were kind of nebulous, but I really did amount to something when I look back at the decade in aggregate. When you turn 30, if you think about how far you've come since you were 20, you'd probably be surprised at how competent you are now, or how incompetent you were then. Number two, in your 30s is when most people really start to get leverage. What I mean by that is you're often in the position where you start to be able to command other people's time outside of your own. Instead of just being as productive as the hours that you personally work, you've hopefully started to build up a team, maybe you're a manager now, some management experience, maybe you have a personal brand you've been building, but you start to have the ability to get leverage on other people's time and to build something that will scale beyond your own effort. And so for me, how that manifested was, I actually knew how to build a company. I knew how to get people excited about building a vision that I wanted to breathe into the world. In my 30s is when we really made it big with Twitch, and I started to invest in other people. I had a reputation as someone in Silicon Valley, and I was able to start leveraging that to make investments, be advisors to companies, like meet people, network, and kind of build something that was bigger than just the hours I spent in my 20s as a programmer. Number three, you have way more resources in your 30s than you did in your 20s. I remember in my 20s when I started off, when we were building our startup, I was making about $800 a month. That's kind of what we were taking in salary in our first company. It was not that much, just enough for burritos every day. And after working in tech for a decade and saving a lot, I had a buffer where I felt like I had some breathing room to really make bigger swings and think bigger and think about how do I build really big companies, instead of thinking like, how am I going to not start? And so, I think with more resources comes the ability to think bigger and have a little bit more breathing room. And that can be really valuable in being able to plan out a few steps ahead instead of just thinking every, week to week or month to month. Fourth thing, in your 30s, your network is bigger, hopefully. You've had a decade of experience. Before Twitch, when we're starting this company called Kiko, it brainstormed all these different product ideas, and there's one product that we wanted to build, that kind of like influencer advertising app. And I was trying to think of how to connect to people that we would sell this to, potential customers. It was super hard because, I didn't know anyone. I had 0 years of work experience, and we were just fresh out of college. In your 30s, whenever you think of an idea and you want to get started working with people, it's so much easier because you spent a whole decade out in the workforce, meeting people, potential collaborators, people you've worked with in the past, maybe people who might invest in your business, and people to bounce your ideas off of. And that's super valuable. All those connections help shortcut you in terms of finding people to work with, people to hire if you're starting a company, customers, if you have a new startup, and things can just go a lot faster when you're networked. Number 5, in your 30s, you have much better friends. To be honest, my friends in my 20s were people who were around that were available to get drunk with. I'm still friends with a lot of them, actually. I think by the time you're in your 30s, you've had that additional decade to invest in your best friendships, and you really know who you can rely on, who's there for you, who you can connect more deeply with, be vulnerable with, share your fears with, have someone who's listens to you, supports you, who you can call to hide a body when you need to. Now, in all seriousness, if you've done things right and you've invested in your friendships, you just have much, much better and deeper connections with your friends. By the time you're in your 30s, you've really been through a lot with these people, and you have these deep relationships to draw on. When I was in my 20s, my early friends were all these startup founders that my co-founders of my companies, founders of companies like Reddit and Weebly and Dropbox and all these companies. And it was funny because, a decade later, everyone's a lot more successful, and you're like, oh wow, I know all these people, but the connections that you have are really formed when you're like in the trenches and going through that grind with people. When I was early in Silicon Valley, I used to see all these people who were, like older investors or something, maybe they were on our board, or like they were older investors we knew, or older industry executives. You just say someone like, oh, at this company, like I could learn a lot from them. They were like, oh, I know that person. Like 20 years ago, we started a company together, or it was like, he was an investor in my company, or we're on our board together, or whatever. And you just build these relationships over these long periods of time from being in an industry, which is super valuable. I mean, that sounds transactional. It's not just valuable. It's valuable to you as like a connection. The most important thing is to have these deep connections with people. And, it goes back to the networking point where, it can be really also useful from a networking perspective. People are going to think I'm like really just a transactional human being, but well, you're entitled to your opinion. Number 6, this is one of the most important points. You may have found some success by the time you've hit your 30s, and you get to realize maybe success in the external world isn't the thing that's going to make me happy. That's what happened for me. Was I was on this grind. I was always trying to accomplish and get ahead and be better than the next guy, keep up with the Joneses, build a bigger startup. And I realized once I became successful that it wasn't really fulfilling me. And that led to a journey I talk a lot about on this channel, discovering what really motivates me, what are my intrinsic motivators. But I would never have gotten there, to be honest, if I had that success and had found it wanting. A lot of friends of mine have gone through similar journeys as they become a little bit more established in their careers, then had some space to ask the question, wait, what do I really want to do with my life? And so the sooner you can get to that point, asking that question, the better off you'll be. But often for people, me telling you is not going to make you actually ask yourself. It's really only you achieving all the goals you thought you wanted. And so, good luck if you get there. And that's what's so exciting about your 30s is you get to be in that place and have that moment in time where you get to think about those things and maybe get to do a little self-examination. And lastly, number 7, in your 30s, if you've gone through all these steps, you know yourself more. You know what you want to do, what you don't want to do, what you like, what activates you. Oftentimes, you spend your 20s doing a lot of different things and learning about yourself and some of those things you don't like, and hopefully you learn some of the things that you do like. And in your 30s, you get the opportunity to focus on those things and to focus on the things that give you joy. There's this concept I like called Ikigai, which is the intersection of what you're good at, what you love doing, what society needs, and what you can get paid for. And if you find the intersection of all four of those things, that's like your power alley. That's your sweet spot, your zone of genius. And so hopefully in your 20s, you spent your time experimenting with a lot of different things and figuring out what you're good at and what you love doing, what activates you, and you can really zero in on that and live as much of your life in your 30s doing those things as possible. And of course, there are some things in your 30s that aren't as good as when you're in your 20s. We should be intellectually honest about that. Number one is your health is gonna decline. When I was in my 20s, I could go out drinking all night, wake up, work. Somehow, I'd be hungover, but I could still do it. In your 30s, you definitely can't do that. You're gonna be slower, you're gonna build less muscle mass, you're gonna be more tired. And so the good news is that if you know that, you can mitigate that by exercising, taking care of yourself, eating healthy, building up like a routine, fitness and wellness routine. But nothing beats your 20s when you're at your peak physical shape. Your default physical state is gonna be worse than in your 20s. And then also, you're dumber. People, it's pretty established that people do their best work mentally, their best thinking work in their early 20s, mathematical advances. It's always math professors in their 20s making doing the complex new mathematical proofs. So, if you're watching this video and you're 29, maybe don't be a math professor. No, but in all seriousness, it's gonna be hard to do. A lot of people, they shift from being like a programmer, now they gotta go become a VC, because that's all they have the mental capacity to do now, just being honest. All right, as a bonus, I'm gonna cover what not to do in your 30s if you wanna maximize your life. First thing not to do, keep grinding that career treadmill. As I always say, careers are fake. Careers are an invention that we made in this capitalist society to keep people on a treadmill and keep them trying to get, it's like levels in a video game, World of Warcraft, level 60, right? When I was in college, I wanted to get to level 60. Why? Some guy who was inventing World of Warcraft made 60 the biggest level. And it's like all of that, and it's like Facebook has the same shit. There's like 10 career levels, or like Google, all these companies have like levels. They called it the same thing as World of Warcraft. Hello. That should be very sus. So like in your 20s, you go to college, and then there's levels in college, like freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. Those levels you automatically get to if you're not that dumb, But then you go into the workforce and they're like, oh, now you're at Facebook, you're like level 1 or whatever. I don't know what you start off as, but then you're like level 1, and I think you start actually at level like 3 or something like that. And then it's like, okay, I'm gonna get to the next one and the next one. I gotta do all this career tracking shit. That's all invented. It's a fugazi. It's fake. They made that so that you would have something to aspire to within these giant mega corporations. The reason I say you need to get off the treadmill is it's a distraction from what you really want to do. Like, what is activating your life? What do you give a shit about? Figuring that out should be your mission, not like advancing at this video game that somebody else made of your life. Wake up, sheeple! Wake up, sheeple! Number 2 thing not to do, stop learning or trying new things. It's a common thing. I see a lot of my friends do it. They're comfortable in the stuff that they're good at, right? In your 20s, you've explored stuff, you maybe figured out some things you're really good at, and then in their 30s, they just double down only on the stuff they're good at, but they stop learning or trying new things. They just focus in on their industry, they stop exploring. And that is the number one way that you're gonna make your brain brittle and you're going to become dumber, which is already, as we discussed, that's already a natural thing that's gonna happen to you. So you need to figure out ways to mitigate that. And if you just get stuck in your routine and the things that you're comfortable with, and you focus only on the things that you're good at, you're gonna get trapped. That's its own trap, so pick up a hobby, try something new, go outside, go skydiving, whatever it is, you have to always be figuring out how to expose yourself to new ideas and new things and keep learning. Really important factor in life is how do you cultivate your curiosity and always be learning. Lastly, number 3, don't get too comfortable. I think this applies to the point before where it's like, don't get too comfortable with only doing the things you're good at, but it also applies to your physical circumstances. Physical shocks are good to the system, whether it's fasting or cold exposure or whatever, but a lot of people, once they become, that yuppie status, they're like a level 5 at Facebook or whatever, and they're like in their career, they're eating good every night, they're like going to fancy restaurants, they're flying business class only, they've got a comfortable Mercedes that they're driving down to work, and Menlo Park or where the fuck it is. You know, you can get trapped in a life of comfort. But shocks to the system and moments of discomfort, those are the things that make you resilient. So I like to figure out, how do I get outside my comfort zone often and try new things? Maybe that's uncomfortable for me because I'm forcing myself to learn something I'm not good at. Or, you know, maybe it's physical challenges. It's like learning how to play a new sport. It's fasting. It's pushing yourself in some dimension. Maybe you're running a marathon, whatever it is. Figure out how to get outside your comfort zone. You want to be anti-fragile. I've always, my whole life, thought of myself as the underdog. And I've always put myself in positions where I'm learning something new. Whether it's I'm going into a new industry as a startup founder and I'm having to learn everything about that industry from the ground up. Or I'm trying a new skill. Like right now I'm learning how to be a DJ and trying to get gigs, and I'm like really starting from the bottom. I mean, I'm playing like some real bottom of the barrel events. That's good for me because I'm like, you know, I'm starting from the beginning. It's like I'm in my 20s again. It's always good to figure out how do you get outside your comfort zone and how do you kind of get back in that underdog position. All right, that's it. That's the video. I hope you learned something. You've got a lot to look forward to if you're in your 20s. If you're turning 40, you might have a lot less to look forward to. But I actually am excited. I feel young. In this decade, I feel super young. I feel like almost as young as I've ever been, actually. I feel like I've got a lot of energy and I'm excited for what comes next. Life is a gift. Go open it.